Welcome everybody here, and I'm going to go to full screen hopefully. And there we are. And welcome again, everyone who's online. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's webinar, and want to express my thanks to TROW and CRV for this opportunity. Hopefully, we will challenge you to think about some key concepts on feed efficiency. So basically, many of you know where I live. You'll see the state of Illinois over on your right. The star is where the university is located in the central part of Illinois. Needless to say, we had a wonderful cropping year here, unlike some of our neighbors to the west of us here. Illinois averaged 202 bushels of corn per acre and over 60 bushels per acre on soybean side of it. So a very productive area as well. So let's get on with today's program. In the next 30 minutes, I hope to discuss with you understanding feed efficiency, both in energy and protein, look at the comparisons of these two approaches, and then hopefully give you some tools, some knowledge that you can take back to the farm and apply in today's program. So maybe the first question is, well, why are you here today? Why is there interest in feed efficiency? And as Joost already has pointed out, that the feed cost is the major part of producing milk in the world, here in the United States or Canada or whatever country you happen to be in here. But another important aspect is that dry matter maximizing, we're using the word optimizing now, dry matter intake. Dry matter costs money. And so certainly with today's economics and profit margins, any place you and I can find some hidden money, that's going to be a real plus. Another aspect of feed efficiency are weigh-backs, and we can discuss that in the Q&A period, but certainly that's an important aspect. Should you feed an empty bump? I say no, I would not recommend that. But then again, would I have 5 or 8% overfeeding? I wouldn't do that either because of economics. Certainly dairy has been a bit late coming to the party. Feed efficiency is the measure for beef and swine, poultry, and fish. And so it's a relatively new aspect. But the good news is even our journals now are reporting feed efficiencies on their research studies. And look at the bottom line. Feed efficiency can be as low as 1.3. You'll see what that means in just a minute, to over 2. Both of them are at really risk on the dairy farm if you have either of those two extreme numbers. So a lot of ways of defining feed efficiency. The most common one, as Joost pointed out, is the first one: kilograms of energy-corrected milk per kilogram of dry matter intake. I think you'll see us here in central Illinois going to the next one: milk solids per kilogram of dry matter intake, because that is how our milk is priced. Kilos of fat, kilos of protein is driving the value of milk. If you're in a pasture scenario, which you may find in Ireland, for example, and New Zealand, countries like that, kilograms per hectare might be another measurement there. One we'll talk about is nitrogen efficiency. And then the last one, I might have to come back to looking at milk solids per unit of carbon dioxide put out, or greenhouse gases, or methane. So certainly this is becoming an important consideration as well. So we didn't want to do that, Mike. So let's go back and get that corrected here. And so we're going to go back to the first slide. Just bear with me. My unit just went off the area a little bit, and be sure we are all caught up here. And now we're back where we should be, and I'll behave myself at this point. Let's look at our first phase: energy-based feed efficiency. I call it energy because it's really driven off of dry matter intake. And so here are some of the formulas. I thought I'd share all the ones I could find in the literature with you. The first one is energy-corrected milk, which corrects for both butter, fat, and milk protein being produced. The most common one we use in the U.S. is the first one in the 3.5% fat-corrected milk. And there is your formula. It's fairly simple at this form. In fact, some of our farmers have that into their management systems listed there. There is a second formula there that also will calculate. Why 3.5? Well, when we started working with feed efficiency, this is kind of the typical milk fat level you'll find in Holstein cattle here in the U.S. Of course, that has gone up significantly, as you'll see here in just a minute. And then, of course, you can go to 4% fat-corrected milk. The key take-home message is be sure you know which one you're using to compare to my standards, because it will make a difference, as you'll see here in just a minute. And what I did is took jerseys in the U.S. and Holsteins in the U.S. Their typical milk production levels listed there. Their components are listed as well. If you want to run those through the formulas, these are the four answers you will see. Energy corrected milk, 3.5 with the Formula 1, and that's the one we tend to use. 3.5 with Formula number 2, and then, of course, 4% fat corrected milk is the fourth one. And the point is that you can see that the first three generate just about identical numbers. So unless you go to 4% fat corrected milk, then my guidelines will fit very nicely for you, but be wide awake on that, because some firms, some researchers may use 4% corrected milk or energy corrected milk in their calculation. Here are some of your guidelines you can look at. If you look over, there's the definition, very straightforward. It's the kilograms of 3.5% fat corrected milk divided by the kilograms of dry matter consumed. You'll see a slightly different approach here coming with my next speaker, but now on the right side you can see an example. If my herd is averaging 30 kilograms of milk, 3.5 fat corrected milk, and so they are consuming an average, not way back, don't count way backs, it only counts the feed going into the cow, that would be your 1.5. And that's kind of one of the target numbers you'll see on the left side of it. For those of you online that have larger herds, that have groups of cows, you can see how this number will really change on groups. And that's one of the real powers of this. And that is, if you've got a group of first lactation heifers, what is that, or lactating cows, what is that number compared to older cows? And so you can see for many of my farms in Illinois, we are a one group farm. So we're down to the fourth number down there in the bottom, which would be a value over 1.5 kilograms of milk per kilogram of dry matter, and certainly nice guidelines. Maybe most of you would like this table. This comes from The Ohio State University. Dr. Norman St. Pierre, some of you recognize the number, produced this table several years ago. And now you can see the very straightforward trend. If you look in kilograms of milk, you can see that if a herd is averaging 25 kilos, feed efficiency 1.25, and I won't read all the rest of these numbers to you. The good news is that these PowerPoint will be available to you after the presentation that you can study in more detail, but certainly you can really hone in, really target the kind of numbers you should be seeing in your herds that you are working with as well. Well, as you already pointed out, that there's money on the table. This slide looks at the economics of feed efficiency, and it's a fun example. I took a herd, a cow group, whatever you want to call it, averaging roughly 32 kilograms of milk with a cost of 26 cents per kilogram of dry matter. That number is a little bit low right now. Feed costs are relatively high in the U.S., our dairy farmers have discovered. But look at the take-home message. So if I had a feed efficiency of 1.3, those cows are eating 24.5 kilograms of dry matter. If I had a 1.5, which is where we want to be, they'll be eating only 21.2. Look at the difference. You can see if I can move my herd from 1.4 to 1.5, that feed savings is nearly 40 cents US per cow per day. That's a huge number when you look at profitability, regardless if you're feeding 100 cows or 1,000 cows as well. And so certainly there are some significant economic advantages to getting optimal feed efficiency in your dairy herd on your farm. So I think the real power of feed efficiency is, how does it change on your farm over time? And then the question is, well, why did it change? Did you get cows pregnant? Did you add a different feed supplement? Did you improve pasture management? Whatever the case is, if feed efficiency goes up or down, then you have to ask, why did that happen on my dairy farm? And so here is the list. Obviously, in our 30-minute presentation, we will not walk through all of these, but it's not an easy task. There's lots of factors that can, in fact, impact feed efficiency on dairy farms. I highlighted in red, or at least kind of reddish brown in my PowerPoint, what I call the big four. The first one is feed digestibility. Obviously, this has got forage quality written all over it. Simply says, if I have high forage quality, my cows can get more nutrients per unit of dry matter going to those cows. Days in milk, notice that's highlighted. Simply means that once you get over 200 days in milk, you are now starting to milk what we would call in the US a staler herd. Stale meaning not as fresh as they should be. And we know that the most efficient cows are your highest producing cows in early lactation. So reproductive performance is critical. Somatic cell count. We all understand that if you have high somatic cell counts, you're going to lose milk yield. And of course, that affects feed efficiency. And then, of course, the big one, rumen acidosis, SARA, subacute rumen acidosis. That affects the ability to digest fibers and affects rate of passage in the feeding program. So lots of things to look at as well. You'll notice the word BST that is not being used in the US or Canada, but it is being used in some South American countries. And so we may have some of those people online as well. Let's go back one. We skipped one. I'm sorry about that. Here we go. This shows the impact. If one of those squares or triangles, diamonds are a different farm. And you can see as you look at dry matter digestibility, DMD, that increases, we increase feed efficiency. So certainly we know that is an important factor, and that affects certainly forage quality. That's got that written all over it as well. We go to the next one. This is some work from Dr. Jim Lynn at the University of Minnesota, and that looks at feed efficiency based on days in milk. And so you can see once you get over 200 days in milk, we really start to curve down. And so if you've got a bunch of later lactation cows, you don't have enough fresh cows in the herd, your feed efficiency is going to suffer as far as that goes, irregardless of what you and I feed those cows. I've got to get those cows pregnant and back in the milking stream. We then look at another term that you will hear in the literature. It's called RFI. That stands for residual feed intake. And simply it means, and our next speaker will really discuss it in much more detail, it simply says that not all cows have the same feed efficiency. And so those cows, you can see what the table is a unique one, comes from Michigan State University, actually, Mike Vanderhaar. And that simply shows those cows that are below the solid line, those are your really efficient cows, which means they produce the same level of milk, but with less dry matter being consumed. And there are some genetic components to this, and our next speaker will certainly discuss that in much more detail here. So that's an important factor, residual feed intake. We saw that when I grew up on our dairy farm in Wisconsin, that you'll have a cow and a cow standing side by side, and one cow gives 40 liters of milk, another one gave 30 liters of milk, and you wonder why. They're eating the same feed, the same bunk, the same days of milk. Interesting question. Well, now let's switch gears. My time is rapidly getting away on me here as I check my watch, and you're probably checking yours as well. And that is we're going to go to the second one. So the first one was energy. I call that energy efficiency, really driven by dry matter intake. And that's kind of where all the action is now. We are going to start looking at this one now, folks. So this is kind of the new stuff that I'd like to challenge you with, and that is what we call protein-based feed efficiency. And like we did before, let's ask a couple of questions on that. Well, why is protein important? Well, let's actually, for clarity, let's just make believe that word is amino acid instead of protein. But we use the generic term protein there. And you can see the entire list of why milk protein is important. It does a lot of important things, certainly impacts dry matter intake. I think one of your challenges you and I share that is not only do we have to have the protein requirement for the dairy cow, but also for the rumen bacteria. So that is your job. Unlike when you're feeding chickens or pigs, certainly we have a bigger challenge with us out there in the feeding program. Very busy slide. My apologies, but I want to show it to you. This is one you want to download, or even if you can now, you can capture it right now. Some of you know how to do that. This shows you the 2001 NRC, and that is the black number. And then 2021. I just got my book about 10 days ago. So I decided to ask the folks over at Trial if we could put those numbers in there. And there's two huge take-home messages. First of all, you'll see the new NRC change the numbers. And the ones you really want to watch is the top one, dry matter intake, and the bottom one, metabolizable protein. This is the true amino acids getting to the small intestine for the cow to absorb, hopefully to do her various biological functions. And you saw there's some really big time changes down in the metabolizable protein level. And then the other take-home message on this PowerPoint is look at the different stages of the gestation and lactation curve. I got a far-off dry cow, the close-up dry cows the last 21 days before calving, fresh, early, mid, and late lactation cows. And we have another new concept that we could add, maybe have another seminar another time. That's called precision feeding. In other words, we're saying the trick now on dairy farms is, can you use precision feeding to get these requirements to these cows? And of course, robotic feeders are certainly going to be a new tool that is rapidly coming on the U.S. base here, more so for labor than it is for precision feeding, but it gives us added flexibility. But my last here, my third take-home point. Notice, look at the close-up dry cow. You will notice if you multiply those two numbers together, you get 1,200 grams of metabolizable protein. And that's the number we're kind of targeting right now for our dry cows. But you get there only if the dry matter is at 12.3 kilos and you're at basically 10% metabolizable protein. If either one of those numbers are not correct, you will not get 1,200 grams of metabolizable protein. So it's a very busy table with lots of guidelines. And we also have one for carbohydrates, but that one's a little bit more of a challenge, and that's another topic for another day. But certainly meeting these protein requirements are going to be important. Why do we want to use metabolizable protein? Well, you pretty much know the story here. This is some work done by Dr. Varga from Penn State University. She looked at 81 different studies and looked at the relationship of milk yield to dietary crude protein. And as we would jokingly say in the U.S., that's kind of a shotgun pattern. I mean, those dots are those are all the 81 different studies. They're quite random of sorts as far as that goes. And so what I want to just share this one to you, that is taking some of that same data. And if we only click once on it, we'll stay there. And you'll see that we take that same data, pull together from another study, but from another source. But now you got metabolizable protein. And now all those dots become very uniform, as you can see with the response here, with a very high R squared, which means that 72% of the variation that we see on this line can be explained by metabolizable protein levels in the diet. So that's why you and I are at MP. So hopefully I've sold you on why the old NRC 2001 and the current NRC 2021 are staying with metabolizable protein instead of crude protein. And of course, to do that, you'll have to have a rumen model. Now, what about the rumen microbes? What do those guys and gals really want in the rumen? And basically, they'll be looking at three sources of nitrogen. They want ammonia. And of course, that can come from grass silage. That can come from other feedstuffs. It can come from urea, for example. And of course, that can improve fiber digestibility. Some microbes need amino acids, and that's why some of your protein needs to be degraded in the rumen, so that those microbes have that nitrogen source there. And then the third one is peptides, and that was a very hot topic 10 years ago. Guys and gals, it's going to come back. There are now new research looking at some of the branched chain peptides to see what they might do out there in the rumen as well. So be aware that we need to have this varied source. These are for the rumen microbes. Remember, your cows, however, they need amino acids. And of course, there are going to be three sources of amino acids for your lactating cow. We already talked about the rumen microbes. You'll see that what that looks like in just a minute here. The rumen undegraded protein, another source of amino acids for your cows. And of course, they vary. For example, if you're looking at a source of lysine and heat-treated soy products really come to the forefront. Methionine would coming from some of my corn byproducts, corn distillers, and those kinds of products, corn gluten meal products like that. And of course, the third one will be the rumen protected amino acids. And of course, this is going to be a more expensive source out there in the feeding program. So look at this one. This comes from Dr. Chuck Schwab. It's one of our feeding guide booklets. And this shows you how it varies. Now remember, these are the amino acid profiles. Look at the top three. That's what we need for, and this is as percent of essential amino acids. You see lysine, methionine. The new NRC is going to expand that to 5 amino acids. Histidine will be another one added to that when you study that as well. But notice what milk requirements are for those essential amino acids, lysine, methionine. Then look at the rumen microbes. Spot on. In other words, almost exactly what the cow needs. So that's the good news. Anything you can do to optimize rumen production of protein, microbial protein, is going to be a real win on amino acids. Then you can look down on your common feedstuff, forages and grains. I will not read those numbers to you. None of those are really perfect until you get down to fish meal. Well, the good news is that it's a very nice product. The bad news is really expensive here in the United States, and you have some palatability challenges and some potential butterfat changes that can occur with it as well. So all feeds are not perfect in terms of what they can provide, but that's your job as nutritionists to get those amino acids to those dairy cows out there in the program. So Dr. Jimmy Clark put this slide together. Some of you recognize that name from the University of Illinois. Dr. Clark said, well, if you feed rumen-protected amino acids, while they're expensive, and we estimate about 20% of our farmers are feeding rumen-protected amino acids at some level, at some source. On a field survey done a couple of years ago, three things can happen. When I feed that rumen-protected amino acid, I can see an increase in milk protein. And of course, that's a real plus because right now milk protein is more valuable in the U.S. than milk fat. That is changing every month a little bit. Protein was way more valuable here a couple of months ago, and now milk fat is becoming more valuable because of a tightness of butter supplies in the world, actually, there. If you increase milk protein, Dr. Clark would suggest if you add the amino acid, since it's going to be absorbed into the bloodstream in early high-producing cows, you would expect to see that occur in 3 days. You'll see usually those are the two sources that have been research studied. Another one could be an increase in milk yield. And of course, the last one could be an increase in milk fat tests, especially with rumen-protected methionine, which has other factors besides just being amino acid. It does some things in the liver, it does some other factors out there in the feeding program. So let's just look at one study. This is from The Ohio State University. This shows you one study showing the control cows, and those cows are balanced for amino acids. And you can see both these diets are identical in crude protein. They did not list metabolizable protein levels, I wish they did, but that when they did the research in the journal, it wasn't there. And these cows understood exactly what was supposed to happen. So when we balance for amino acids at the same crude protein level, notice we got about a 3.5 kilogram increase in milk yield. We see a tenth of a point increase in total protein. The milk urea nitrogens, MUNs, went down slightly, which we would expect. And finally, income over feed costs, using those costs at that time in the research study, even though those amino acids are more expensive and they use more targeted feeds, you can see that these cows made well in excess of $1 more income over feed costs. So this is one of the real powerful studies that shows the impact we can have with protein efficiency when we get it right out there in the feeding program. Let's just say a quick word on MUNs. Some of you may have heard about milk urea nitrogen. We think it's a tremendous tool, just like feed efficiency is a tremendous tool because it kind of gives me, I can listen to my cows talk to me. So milk urea nitrogen reflects the cow's ability, or I should say the cow's rumen microbes, to capture nitrogen as microbial protein. If the rumen microbes do not capture that ammonia, that breakdown, that soluble rumen degraded protein from other sources, ends up going to ammonia, and that goes across the rumen wall, goes to the liver. The liver says, that's bad news. That's going to goof up my blood pH. I'm going to convert that to blood urea nitrogen. And of course, then the cow has to deal with that either by recycling, kicking out in the urine, or ends up in the milk as milk urea nitrogen. Our numbers, we say that once you get over 12, and that is expressed of milligrams per deciliter, then we're losing some efficiency. In fact, some of our best herds are right around 10 milligrams per deciliter. I know in Europe sometimes you express that as millimolar, so just be keenly aware that number will be about twice this value here if you're using mill equivalents instead of milligrams. And of course, all that is going to run basically on the level of protein, the type of proteins you're feeding. Carbohydrates become a big factor. There's a whole discussion on milk urea nitrogen, but another wonderful tool, much like feed efficiency. So let's start wrapping up here because my time is just about gone here. We're down to our last 5 minutes. And basically, when should we be looking at adding supplemented rumen-protected amino acids? And this is my guideline. Now, every one of you online today will have your guidelines. When will you pull the trigger? And I'm going to look at those herds and cows that are producing over 1.1 kilograms of total milk protein per cow per day. That's my guideline. That's when I certainly would be looking at my model to ask, Would my cows benefit from adding rumen-protected histidine or lysine, methionine, or other amino acids? You're going to see many more coming on the marketplace with the new NRC that came out here in the U.S. And so for Holsteins in Illinois, that'd be those cows over 35 kilograms a day with a 3-2 true protein level, and Jerseys, that would be those that are sitting at 25 kilograms of milk at the respective protein levels as well. I know some of the countries, some of the Danish countries will be much higher in components, and some of the other European countries. So certainly you can manipulate this however you wish to do out there on the farm. So this is a neat slide that Dr. Mike Vanderhaar put together that is we shows how do you, and this is your take-home message. So it says, okay, I'm going to ask you, dairy farmer says to you, listener, I want to increase energy efficiency, or I want to increase protein efficiency. Or what should I do? Well, these are the typical base numbers. Some of you will be surprised how low these numbers are, but that's what it is. In other words, we are capturing about 21% of the energy in the diet coming off as milk energy. Protein's about 28%. I think we'll get our energies up into that 30%. Our proteins can approach 35% on our unique diets done at Cornell University. So here are all the things on the farm that you can do to increase either one of those variables. Obviously, if I can increase milk yield by 10%, those numbers all go up in a logical one. Here's another one to think about. If I can keep these cows in the herd one lactation longer, and I think our next speaker will address that as well, you'll see that I do get a nice increase in efficiency because now I'm milking more mature cows. Enough on that. If I can reduce the age of first calving, in other words, getting them in the herd quicker, look at the nice efficiency gain I can see there as well. Reducing calving interval, we already talked about that, a nice improvement in both factors there. If I reduce the dietary protein 2%, you can see a nice increase in protein efficiency, nothing on energy because by and large, the protein is not going to be used in that source. And of course, the 100-pound gorilla, reducing feed waste. And most farms, you'll see anywhere from 6 to 8% feed waste out there on the farm, and another topic for another day as well. So certainly that's your kind of your take-home messages on the farm to say, how can we manipulate and improve the dynamics of these two variables there? Well, where's the future going? And our next speaker will cover some of these as well. Obviously, if I can reduce heat increment, this is the heat of digestion, fermentation losses, lower gut losses. That simply means I have more of those nutrients available for lactation, for growth, for reproduction, whatever the biological function for that cow is going to be. You already saw the slide on feed digestibility. It's huge at this stage of the game. Improving efficiency and milk synthesis. This could be genetic, obviously, other ways as well. Controlling activity losses. Obviously, when cows are out and about on pasture, they utilize a significant amount of energy walking in the pasture, grazing, and also going to the milking parlor. That's becoming a factor in the U.S. Some of these cows in herds that have 2,000 or 3,000 cows walk significant distances when they're being milked 3 times a day as far as that goes. And of course, the big one down there is reduced feed losses as well. So it looks like I have used my full my full allotment of time here. And with that, our take-home messages, and I really believe this. I'm a big fan of feed efficiency. It's another benchmark. And it's got economics written all over it, but it's a nice tool, much like somatic cell count is a tool for mastitis, and certainly milk urea nitrogen is a nice tool to evaluate protein dynamics, certainly a big factor as well. Keep watching. I think we're going to see new literature coming out on feed efficiency in our journals and our research studies, especially when we start looking at greenhouse gases. I mean, this is going to become a big factor, no question about it. And feed efficiency is a player in that as well. Hopefully, I've challenged you to think about it on your individual farms. I think if I go to a dairy meeting, maybe 1 or 2 farmers can tell me what their feed efficiency numbers are. And yet, to me, that's just as important to know what their average milk yield is or what their average daily gain on their heifers are. And of course, I want to optimize dry matter intake. Don't want to maximize it. I want to use it properly out there in the feeding program. And with that, Jos, I think that should wrap me up here. And that would be our last slide. And with that, I'll turn the program back to you. Thank you very much for your kind attention.